I've got huge Madden 26 gameplay news for you. EA Sports just released a 30-plus page blog, and I'm breaking down everything that you need to know. Now, there are a lot of changes coming to the game this year, but keep in mind that some of these features are likely coming over to College Football 26 too. And while I'm breaking down this Madden 26 gameplay news, did you know that 65% of the people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed? I'm closing in on 300,000 subs here on YouTube, so if you enjoy my breakdowns of news for Madden and college football, I'd love for you to subscribe and get me just that much closer to my goal this year. Now, as I went through this blog, there's, again, a ton of information to break down, but one of the first things EA hits on is they talk about signature identity and how they try to make every game feel a little bit different. We've heard this before, but I do like a lot of the things we're seeing. It really feels like there's a big separation for trying to make sure that game to game, that each team kind of feels unique and different and players feel different, and that is a welcome change to Madden in my opinion, because it has not been that for probably our entire lives. They break this down with QB DNA and they talk about in-pocket behaviors, and they say the first component of QB DNA is the behavior inside the pocket. The first thing you'll notice is the new signature ball holds, pause if needed. We'll all have 9 unique ball holds at launch, including 2-hand and 1-hand variations of high and low holds, or the by chin, by back holds. For 1-hand variations, the QB AI is actually dynamic enough to contextually switch to 2-hand holds when under pressure or in traffic to increase ball security. I know some of you guys are probably saying, it's not that big of a deal, GGB, but these are the kind of things that Madden has not had in forever. And so to have this sort of stuff, which feels more like what 2K has had over the course of their NBA 2K series, this is a good step. The cool thing about these though is that they actually align with kind of each QB's throwing motion and how it works. So there's less stress in kind of the animations they're trying to blend together, which means that this should look much better for us. So the new ball holds they have are Gunslinger, Gunslinger 1-hand, Gunslinger mid, Gunslinger 1-hand low, 2-hand middle, 2-hand middle back, 2-hand middle below chin, 2-hand low, and 2-hand middle. They also have a couple of new animations around in-pocket idle, so the QBs are kind of bouncing around on their feet a little bit more, patting the ball, moving their head around to find open receivers when they're standing in the pocket. Again, these are small details that go a long way. I talked a lot about this in my hands-on impressions, but I did notice a lot of the scramble on the run stuff improving for QBs, and they've talked a lot about how their scramble game is improving for both passing and running. So one of the things they talk about here is to further improve the QB scrambling, they've added to their run cycle set. So last year they had 4 superstar running backs, including Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey, and I believe also Isaiah Pacheco from the Kansas City Chiefs. But they mentioned that this year they're actually expanding that to scrambling quarterbacks. So that means Kyler Murray has his unique running style, Jalen Hurts, and obviously Patrick Mahomes will have their individual locomotion sets. And they've added coverage to their traditional 1-hand and 2-hand scramble types, which means that each QB is going to be kind of assigned that based on how they hold the actual ball when they scramble. And then from the passing perspective, they've also refreshed kind of the in-pocket throws. So they have back foot and back step passes, the lob animations, the signature throw styles. But they've added new types of signature passes that they're calling signature off-platform throws. Now, these are going to be unique situational passes that they can really only be triggered by specific players. So think about a jump pass from Caleb Williams when he had that one on the sideline, no-look passes by Mahomes and Matt Stafford, which they obviously are famous for, explosive cross-body throws by Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. These are really special passes that kind of trigger for these specific players in similar situations that kind of match what they did in real life. And how these trigger is going to be different. So some QBs need to be moving in a specific direction to do it. Some QBs need to be under pressure. It's going to be interesting, but when you see these, it's really cool to see them actually play out in the game, and it makes you jump into instant replay. They've also added unique arm slots, so you have over top, 3/4 high, and 3/4 low that'll be assigned to each QB based on what their default kind of throw angle is in real life. And if you're probably one of those people saying, well, what about QBs that don't throw the same way every time? Well, they have that covered too. So guys like Matt Stafford, who kind of change their arm slot all the time, they can dynamically change from one arm slot to another based in order to get, the pass through on an open lane. And if you jump into instant replay, you can actually see the ball leaving the pointer finger last, which is what we should be seeing. A lot of times in Madden, or I think really forever in Madden, the ball has just sort of like popped out of the QB's hands. Again, these little animations that actually go down to the authenticity, that's what we've needed, and it goes similar to what 2K has done with their basketball game. So when you kind of look at, the QB DNA in pocket, on the run, and passing, there's about 500 new animations and 40 unique quarterback recipes that kind of blend all that stuff together. So if you're playing a CPU control QB, using one yourself, or playing some, sweat online, you're going to see that each one's going to look a little bit different and behave more similar to their real life counterpart. Now, they're also bringing in field vision this year, which is not vision cone like a lot of people might have thought, but it's a new technology that kind of detects the sight line of the QB in the pocket based on their height. So think a guy like Kyler Murray might be struggling a little bit more in some of those sight lines, but a guy like Josh Allen is going to be a little bit easier because he can see over his line a lot more. How this works is that you're going to see receiver icons kind of fade out a little bit when crossing into different sections of the field that are kind of obstructed from the QB's view based on his offensive line. And EA saying the purpose of this is kind of to bring functionality to more traditional tall pocket QBs and then balance to shorter, more mobile QBs. And to be fair, scrambling QBs, mobile QBs have really been the dominant force in Madden for a long time, and there's never really been a reason to stick with a pocket QB. Well, now there kind of is. And you might have seen this as well. In the backfield, you can actually do the ball carrier moves now. So you can use the right stick to spin, juke, do anything you can with a regular ball carrier with your QB to evade behind the line, which makes guys really, really interesting when you have a mobile QB. If you're asking about Playmaker, that's actually mapped to the left trigger or L2 now, and then you flick the right stick while holding that to make that happen. And then one of the last things they touch on here is that they've done tuning to the pass trajectories to bring more lob and lead to non-bullet passes, so you can feel like you have more fidelity to drop passes into the bucket down the field instead of just feeling like you have to always throw a bullet pass. With all this Madden 26 news as we get ready for the NFL season, make sure you're getting ready for the NFL year with Underdog, today's sponsor. If you love sports like me, their pick'em game is going to be your favorite. It's as simple as picking higher or lower on the projections that you think will happen or maybe not happen. If you use code GGB when you sign up and those picks hit, you can win some big cash. My favorite part about Underdog, though, is that they're always running free play specials. And if you use my code GGB when you sign up, you can get up to $1,000 in bonus credits just for using that and a free pick to help making it a lot easier for you. So if you're somebody like me who loves daily fantasy sports, make sure you hop up with Underdog and use code GGB when you do so. That bonus cash and the free pick makes your NFL Sundays or Thursdays just that much more fun. I talked a little bit about how quarterbacks play a little bit more like their counterparts in real life now, but they've done a little bit to add 50 new player traits at launch that will kind of serve as mentals or decision-making for the CPU-controlled players. So they don't really have any impact on the outcome at all, but they just really allow the AI players to kind of feel different, look different, and ultimately play different in the decisions that they make. So for example, Josh Allen has a run over trait, which makes him more likely to run through contact when scrambling, up the field or getting ready to run out of bounds. He's not going to run out of bounds. He's probably going to truck you. So there are an insane number of these, and as I'm sort of talking about it, we'll show these on screen, but there's look for stars, which is the QB with this trait will look to throw to their star receivers more. A risk taker is somebody who will tend to force the ball downfield and throw it into tight windows. Conservative QBs tend to throw shorter passes and avoid forcing the ball into tight windows. You've got cannon, you have up and over, with a higher tendency to throw lob passes. Snap mischief, guys that'll sort of take down in those late short yardage situations. Seeing ghosts, after a sack, a QB with this trait will tend to force a pass to their first read for the next 3 plays, resetting at the end of a drive. That to me is really cool because it's showing that these aren't just positive traits, they're also traits that can be negative as well. Like if you get to this QB that has seeing ghosts, that could impact them heavily. Happy feet, QBs with this trait will always be moving. You have quick clock, QBs with this trait will tend to escape the pocket after making their first read. Play ball defender, players with this trait will be riskier and try for interceptions, may not be able to reach. You can see that there's ones for defense here as well. Cover ball, players with this trait will attempt to cover the ball on all big hits. Whirlwind, players with this trait will have a higher tendency to attempt a spin move. Finesse rusher, obviously, for a higher tendency to attempt a finesse move. Bullish. There are so many good ones here. Again, I'm trying to show all 50 on the screen for you here, but I'm extremely excited to see how this goes. And they even have throw it up, which is players of this trait will have a higher tendency to target outside receivers on deep or contested throws. So again, I would love to see more of these over time, but I think getting 50 at launch is kind of a good step in the right direction, but I hope they build this feature out. There's more talk about QB AI improvements. You can tell that they've spent a lot of time in this area. And to be fair, QB AI in Madden has been terrible. They're either the most accurate QB of all time despite their rating, or they just throw the ball out of bounds and just make you think, what difficulty am I playing on? Decision making for when it scrambles kind of been improved by adding new logic that takes the game situation into account. So down, distance, score, clock, etc. And they kind of added prediction logic so the QB has an idea of how many yards he can gain before contact. So this makes QBs a lot more aware of sort of the, first down line, so they're better at deciding when is the right time to take off and run, and they don't pull a Dak Prescott, Kellen Moore, and just sort of run at the worst time possible. Pocket movement and behavior has also been improved, so the QB should now be way more aware of the center of the pocket and then the desired launch point correlating with the drop back depth. So this drives when QBs will step up into the pocket or run away from pressure. In some cases, they'll run backwards away from pressure to buy time, but overall, the pocket center gives them kind of an anchor point they want to stay close to kind of avoid the pressure pressure, maximizing the angles of the offensive line to kind of protect that spot. And if you're somebody who loves to blitz the QB, they now have the ability to make hot reads. So if you're blitzing them, higher rated QBs will now be able to throw quickly to receivers if they read quick pressure, whereas lower rated QBs kind of might hang on to the ball a bit more or maybe throw it into double coverage. Their read progression AI has been completely overhauled too. So they're kind of using machine learning models here based on wide receiver openness to train their AI in finding and throwing to an open receiver while they go through their read progression. And how they're doing this to kind of differentiate QBs inside the pocket, the speed at which they're able to kind of progress through these progressions here, it's all driven by the awareness rating, which, thank God, the awareness rating has not really had a point in Madden for, again, what seems like forever. So a higher rated QB might be able to get to their third or even fourth read on a longer play, but a lower rated QB may only make it to their first or second read most of the time. And then as plays extend, this new logic also kind of allows QBs to take more shots down the field when they have a receiver in a one-on-one situation. It should, in theory, create a larger and then kind of more noticeable gap between elite players at the position and then everybody else. And to be honest, if you're a franchise person, this is music to your ears. Coach DNA is a really interesting one too, and it's around basically the same thing that we saw with QB DNA, but for coaches, it's kind of, what would Andy Reid do in this situation? What would Dan Campbell do in this situation? They're kind of bringing this new play call model that'll make coach suggestions and AI play calling more dynamic, and they're saying true to life by each team finding the right play according to what that head coach would do or his staff. So your things like down, distance, score, clock, timeouts, which NFL head coaches and timeouts is a whole nother argument, personnel, field position, and even the weather conditions are kind of used as filters to figure out what available plays in the playbook kind of make the most sense, narrow them down, and then sort of match that to what the team would do in that situation. You're going to see AI control teams make dynamic play calls when playing against them. So a Dan Campbell team, if you're playing against them, will aggressively go for it on fourth down more than really anybody else. Sirianni and his Eagles are probably going to use a lot more RPOs and zone reads to play to the strengths of Jalen Hurts. But if you're wondering how this kind of works for your own play calling, coach suggestions will be powered by the data-driven model. So if you want to compare what you would dial up versus what real-world head coaches would do, you can see that in the coach suggestions tab as well. Something I like to see though is that the data-driven sort of model they're bringing here for coaching is also kind of powering their new adaptive counters, which they kind of dynamically change the suggested plays based on your opponent's tendencies in that game. So whether you're playing against the AI or maybe against another user here, your opponent tendencies are tracked during the game, and the concepts that counter those tendencies become more heavily weighted in the prediction model. So for example, if you're playing against somebody who has a mobile QB, the model will start suggesting more QB contain or zone coverage plays to combat the running QB. And in your coach suggestions menu, they're going to have a specific tag on them that says counter, so you kind of know that these are designed around, what's happening in that game. And they also talk about for anywhere in the game that allows mix and match between the coach and the playbook or coach customization, they've created a league model that has been kind of trained on global NFL play call trends. So they're saying that this kind of ensures that any game played outside of team-specific contacts between the coach and the playbook, play calling will still kind of reflect authentic league-wide tendencies. They're also planning to update this with a title update throughout the year to kind of stay evolving on, the coaching trends that happen. We saw a lot of stuff last year where more coaches going for 2-point conversions. I'd imagine if there's a similar trend this year, we'd see that kind of brought in. There also is a thing coming this year called Coach Speak. So we just talked about the Lions going forward on fourth down. If it's a fourth and short, you'll kind of see a banner featuring Dan Campbell alongside a text insight providing context into the decision. And it's driven by their language learning AI model. We're hearing a lot about AI with Madden this year, but you're going to see signature mentions about grit and grind and maybe even a mention of biting kneecaps. They're kind of trying to make this seem like it's actually Dan Campbell telling you that, albeit in a text-based form. What I'm probably the most excited about from their coaching AI section, though, is them talking about having significant advances in the schematic depth by providing players with just a lot better central adaptive AI systems across these games. So defenses can now disguise their intentions with delayed safety rotations, pre-play defensive front adjustments, precisely timed blitz packages. Like, all this stuff is going to make this a lot more of a cat and mouse game. So if you're playing a team like the Vikings, Brian Flores is going to blitz you like crazy, or the Chiefs might try to aggressively pressure your QB out there with a lot of different blitz-heavy schemes. If you're playing against my Steelers, you're probably going to see a lot of one-high safety looks. You're going to see different kind of diverse personnel groupings, the blitz adjustments, and a lot more disguising on defense to make you really have to read pre-snap before you actually go out there and do something. In terms of playbooks this year, there are over 1,000 new plays at the launch for Madden 26, which they're saying is double the amount of what they introduced for Madden 25. And a lot of the stuff they're introducing this year focuses on motions and shifts, stunts and twists, exotic defensive pressure, and new coach adjustments. They have more plays with kind of auto motion. There's also double motion this year, which I think is really cool, and auto shifts. Stunts and twists on defense, I think, are fantastic, and I think they're a really cool play call addition. You basically, when you're calling your play, you hold down the button that you're calling. So if you're holding down X or square to call a specific defensive play, you're holding that button down. It brings down a sub menu for that specific play, and you can basically look at 12 different stunts to choose from to apply and kind of play in that set. But if you're in a kind of a sub defense and only have 3 or 2 down linemen, you may only have a few, or in some cases, no stunts to actually choose from there. So it's completely dynamic here to make sure that the appropriate stunts are kind of used with the appropriate fronts. You're going to see simulated pressures coming this year that can kind of overload one side without rushing more than 4 players. This is going to result in kind of more looping, crossing, and overall ways to really get blitzers free off of the edge, which to me is exciting. I just hope that we don't see, some of these crazy blitzes that are instant blitzes, but seeing real life NFL blitzes makes me excited. There are new adjustments you can make for your safeties this year, so you can make them play deep, which is essentially 25 yards off the line, prevent, which is 32 yards off the line, tight, which is about 5, or close, which is about 8. In addition to kind of the default alignment that you get from whatever play you called there. You can also adjust the safeties to spread, be wide, pinch. You can even have the midpoint adjusted with the options being left, right, or strong for kind of passing strength here, or weak, which is away from the passing strength, to the field hash, or even to the boundary hash. I think this is really cool because you can align your safeties to get involved versus the run, get deeper to not give up any big plays, which we've all probably done in Madden multiple times per game, and then kind of everything in between, which again keeps your opponent guessing and makes them really do more in the pre-snap side. So think, for example, if your opponent's trying to RPO you to death, you can really have these adjustments to dictate how the AI defenders play versus these read and peek RPOs. You can actually decide when you want them to play versus the run or versus the pass. And with kind of these different zone drops that you ultimately have, you can kind of actually adjust things a little bit by just setting things back to default by simply clicking the left stick, which is great. One of my favorite things they've added this year, though, is that they're doing a lot more around the balance and strategy around fumble. So you no longer on offense have the ability to have a conservative ball carrier adjustment. Thank God. So this adjustment actually is now only activated by AI-controlled ball carriers. I don't know if I love this. They're saying this is more so in player lock situations, but they do call out that this adjustment was super unfair in Madden 25 to avoid, carrying with fumbles. And there was no real risk. It was just a reward. If you're somebody who wants to try to avoid having fumbles in late game situations, then you need to go back to using what you should have been using, which is the cover ball mechanic using right bumper or R1. When you're using the cover ball in the sim game style, you'll have a greatly reduced chance of fumbling. If you're on competitive, as long as cover ball is active before a tackle starts, you should be totally immune to fumbles. One of the things that I'm most excited about, though, is football weather. And I've talked about this a little bit in my previous videos, but seeing the heavy snow, the heavy rain, the fog, it is game changing. What I'm most happy about is that it's not just a visual thing, which is crazy enough, it's also going to impact your gameplay. When you're playing in heavy fog, it's going to make your passing game so much more difficult. You're going to see players slipping when they're trying to make these big cuts. Wide receivers can kind of lose their footing when releasing off the line. Linemen on both sides of the ball can lose their footing during, their get off, and a lot more. A player's change of direction is going to sort of, impact that, along with how much precipitation is really in play there. The players are going to run a little bit different due to the penalties and their speed, acceleration, and change of direction. Kind of most athletes are really not going to be as explosive or smooth when they're playing in heavy snow or rain. And in these conditions, it's going to be harder to kick and throw. So you're going to have penalties to your power and your accuracy from both of those areas. You're going to see more broken tackles, tackles that slide on the wet field, drop passes, fumbles. Again, these are things that should be happening in rain or heavy snow. You're also going to see teams like Buffalo, Chicago, Green Bay, Cleveland, Philly that kind of play in the snow frequently. They're going to perform better than teams from warmer climates. So if you're a Miami, San Fran, one of the teams from LA, Jacksonville, you're trying to play in the snow, you're going to probably have heavier movement penalties here. But there's also the balance on the flip side of that. So cold weather teams will also experience faster rates of fatigue when playing in the heat. Teams that are used to be playing in the heat will fatigue at a slower rate than a traditional cold weather team. The Madden blog also dove into player movement, and really the best way to sum this up is that a 4.240 should feel like a 4.240. College players were faster than Madden players, which didn't really make any sense, because if you run a 4.240 in college, you should be running a 4.240 in the NFL and not be any slower for them. They've also added a lot of different depth chart positions, which, again, we're thankful for that. You're going to see different edges, so a left edge and a right edge, Sam, Mike, and Will for your linebackers now, and a secondary position for nose tackle, sort of the defensive tackle archetype, and then a new gadget player. So think a Taysom, Deebo Samuel, guys like that. The gadget player is probably the really coolest one here. It kind of unlocks unique formations and plays in your playbooks and allows you to use just about any player you want in that position. So regardless of which player you want to use in special packages, there's a matching ratings formula that kind of goes along with it. And it wasn't just changing the depth charts. There's a lot that sort sort of went into like the logic perspective here. They needed to kind of overhaul a lot here. Draft logic, free agency, trades, development, progression, and kind of a lot more are going to reflect in these new position ratings. Oh, and for the long snapper fans out there, yes, long snapper is finally a position that has a primary depth chart position with a long snapper rating. And if you're wondering about Travis Hunter, who obviously is famous for playing 2 different positions, well, they revisited a lot when it came to him because he kind of changed the game. EA said they've removed certain restrictions on depth charts that you can really have now Travis Hunter starting at both receiver and corner if you choose, along with any other wide receiver or corner. The important thing here is that while you can do this, you should also be ready for wear and tear to make it a lot harder for them to be successful if they're kind of playing every snap of the game. Hunter's going to have some benefits that are exclusive to him though, so he's the first rookie that'll really have custom abilities, obviously so, and those abilities kind of make it harder for him to have a lot of wear and tear impact, and it'll be far less than anybody else who's trying to play both sides of the ball. One of the biggest frustrations, especially for me in Madden 25, was pass coverage, and they talk specifically about a couple of areas here, with cover 4 and kind of man coverages being the main ones they looked at. For cover 4, they have a new 4-strong trips and bunch logic. So for route concepts to send a back out of the backfield to a trip side, they kind of added a new push check to their quarters and palms coverages. What this kind of adjustment does here is it kind of bumps the coverage over to the trip side and forces a man match on the receivers so they can get into the route. So rather than trying to rely on a spot drop to cover 4 threats on the side, this check makes defenders more intelligent about which receivers to leverage and less likely to blow the coverage when a number 4 becomes number 1. They've also revamped their China call concept in quarters, palms, and 3 match coverages versus combos, where the number 1 receiver runs a short route like a drag or a smoke route, and the number 2 wide receiver goes deep like a streak or a fade. This to me is fantastic because cover 4 just felt broken a lot of the times last year. It got better, but it still wasn't where it should have been. They've also improved their AI for their deep half defenders so that they reach their landmark a lot quicker and with more urgency as they gain more depth. So players should feel a little bit better about running cover 2 coverages, which align a lot more with what, the current NFL trend of non-traditional Tampa 2 coverages has been. Man coverage has been a hot topic. So the first improvement they made here is that there's kind of a new defender cut reaction system. So based on the ratings matched up with the players and the leverage, the system will kind of allow players to create more separation and authentically have a better variety in the amount of separation that is there. When a receiver wins their cut, the defender can lose balance, allowing for a window to make a big play. Lockdown corners, though, especially in man, they aren't going to be so charitable with the space they kind of give up. So your leverage is going to matter a lot here. The leverage of the defender is going to play a much more significant role in how open a receiver can be than in the past. The base win chance formula is still going to be, man coverage rating versus route running, so short, medium, or deep route. But the leverage side of the defender, however, will have a significantly more impact on the overtime or the outcome at the cut, as well as the amount of separation the receiver can gain. So if the defender is aligned with the outside leverage of snap, the receiver will have a much lower chance to win a cut to the outside, but they could obviously cook on the inside there. This can really just mean the step of separation when winning versus outside leverage versus 2 to 3 steps of separation when making a cut in the opposite direction. They're bringing new SWAT animations to this, and it really just feels like SWAT animations should be more important this year than in previous years. So here's a couple of improvements they're kind of bringing to pass coverage driven directly from what they're saying is community feedback. Increased touch height for SWATs to give defenders more balanced reactions to high ball throws and deep rack catches. High ball throws have always been OP. Improved mid-air interaction logic for defenders so that the interactions look and feel more realistic and situation specific, especially versus high ball throws. For users, it improves the effectiveness of using the play receiver mechanic. Zone drop and custom zone flat defenders will now sprint instead of backpedal to their desired depth when set to 20 yards or more, which makes them play with more urgency and allows them to get to their spot a whole lot faster. Cover 3 sky, cloud, and hard flat plays now play country cover 3, which means that underneath defenders will play zone spot drop zones regardless of the offensive formation. To kind of give you full control in scheming up versus 3x1 formations and bunch, all the cover 3 match and buzz coverages will play skinny and skate respectively, which will allow the defense to match up much better to the popular routes like flood and verticals on the 3 receiver side. The skinny check is the match principle in cover 3, where the backside hook curl defender will be responsible for the vertical route from the number 3 receiver on the trip side. Custom zones are obviously coming to Madden as well. Last year we saw custom route stems, which were broken for a little bit and then became a little bit more normal, but custom zones are kind of the, reaction to that. So to do these, you bring up the hot route menu for an individual defender in pre-play, you hold down the left bumper or L1 and move your coverage up or down. You'll kind of see the play art update for you in real time. And then once you have it desired to the depth you want, you just release LB or, L1, and then you're good. It's important to note, though, if you have zone drops activated by your coach adjustments, the custom zone commands will override the coach adjustment if they're in conflict. Additionally, they have an option this year called route commit. So you can route commit by pressing Y or triangle to bring up coverage adjustments, and then A or X to pick an individual receiver, or all of your defensive backs if you want, with right bumper for defensive keys. You can do this in man coverage to look for outside breaking routes to kind of lock them down. But beware that any in-breaking routes will be lost by your defenders and potentially leave them wide open. So if you don't want to risk too much, you can just shade your defenders via the traditional shading mechanic, which gives them a lot more leverage to defend the routes that you think are being run and take on less risk, but also less reward. To me, last year, the single most broken mechanic in Madden was the tackling. Boom Tech was a terrible name and terrible execution, but from what I played in Madden 26, the tackling feels significantly better. They talked a lot about the issues that kind of surfaced of just how it didn't really break down, but what I can really tell you here is that it's a lot of really work that they had to do, and they've added 700 new tackle animations for launch, with more planned for title updates, which is good news. So wrap catch tackles for DBs at the catch point who aren't big hitters have been adjusted. In-range lunges where the defender is near the ball carrier and doesn't have to leave his feet. These are some of the new animations. Unprepped hit sticks, which are more explosive hit stick interactions meant to capture those moments from Sundays when the ball carrier just really isn't quite prepared for the big hit. And then a variety of the aforementioned reach for the sticks mechanic. And the reach for sticks mechanic I didn't really cover here, but what they've basically done here is it's a user-driven mechanic where you hold the right stick up to kind of attempt to reach the ball out of the tackle. If the ball carrier's arm is free to reach out and the input is received before the tackle is complete, you'll get kind of a reach like you're trying to stretch forward first down or the goal line. AI controlled players will reach the ball out based on their awareness rating. So if you got a wide receiver running back with a high awareness rating, you have a much higher chance here. This carries still a lot of risk though, so if you reach the ball out when you're in a crowd because the ball carrier gets hit while reaching for extra yardage, there is a much higher chance of fumbling. Wear and tear was one of my favorite features that came in College Football 25, and I'm so happy to see it in Madden 26 because it just makes a lot more sense to me to have it in Madden. It still should be in college, but Madden is really a game where wear and tear we see the impacts of much more. If you don't know what wear and tear is, it's basically a system that tracks any contact a player takes over the course of a game and inside of a franchise and superstar over the course of a season. And similar to what we saw in College Football 26's reveal, dynamic subs obviously are coming into this game as well, so simply hitting up on the D-pad kind of brings that menu up, and it's going to be great. You also get a full suite of customization sliders for franchise mode to kind of tweak wear and tear to your liking. I'll have a lot more on wear and tear as a whole, kind of breaking it down fully for you guys when Madden's able to bring out their franchise and presentation deep dive in the next few weeks. Block steering is in the game this year, kind of using the left stick to steer the blocker out of the backfield or side to side like a bull rush in the pass game, or using kind of the button press technique in the run game. This to me opens up so much more in the trenches area. You're going to see this not just from a user standpoint, but AI control players are going to have the ability to fight for control over gaps, and you should have better gap control and more stingy run defense this year. There's a whole host of adjustments they've made to the leverage system in blocking, into the pass block mechanics, and I think all this really sums up by saying we just want there to not be crazy blitzes. We want our offensive linemen to make the proper reads, not let guys shoot through untouched. This should be a much better year from a passing perspective and just a run blocking perspective, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. Superstar abilities got a pretty big overhaul this year. Basically, they are no longer going to have a guaranteed outcome built in at all, which is a giant win for us. So instead of these guaranteed or nearly, guaranteed outcomes, you'll instead see increased chances, close to 50% when the specific conditions of each ability are met. So here's kind of a list of superstar abilities that have been changed. Again, I'm not going to read all these for you, but I'm going to show you pictures on the screen. Tank, edge threat elite, goal line stuff, no outsiders, out my way, El Toro, post up secure protector, pass protector, short route KO, flat zone KO, outmatched, one step ahead, deep zone KO, lurk artist, secure tackler, unfakeable, mid in, mid out, deep out. These to me are much needed because having superstar abilities just be a guarantee is never the move. Nothing is guaranteed in sports. They're also bringing in the hotspot celebrations. These are kind of really cool. Basically, there are 20 solo celebrations plus numerous animations across all these different hotspots. And all you need to do is just basically run your player to one of these 9 hotspots along the boundaries of each end zone. Each hotspot will house unique celebrations that kind of trigger based on where the celebrating player is. You'll see a shadow boxing with a goalpost, totally legal fake dunk attempts that the NFL would but not find you over near the crossbar. Celebrations to kind of interact with the crowd, and even more signature content, just to name a few. The skills trainer got a massive overhaul this year. There were over 130 new tutorials, and they basically mapped each tutorial to a gameplay mechanic. So this to me is fantastic. I think a lot of players don't look at the skills trainer. It is well worth your time, especially when a new game drops, or if you just need to brush up on anything, or just warming up for games. But they have them all from ball carrier mechanics to QB mechanics, receiver option mechanics, offensive pre-play mechanics, tackling, coverage, defensive line, defensive pre-play, kicking, and returning mechanics. There's a whole lot here. A small little nugget though that I did read in the gameplay blog, which has me excited, is finally they can actually tune the gameplay without the need for a client update. So this gives them a lot more agility to be able to respond to gameplay feedback that the community gives. They can kind of tune these primarily with any success chance, reaction time, timing windows that can be kind of modified during the season without needing a gameplay update. And something for those of you that love to have, a lot of different hot routes and combinations, the full route tree is going to be available by default in passing hot routes this year. We just covered an absolute ton of stuff in this gameplay deep dive. Again, 30 plus pages I just took you guys through. And if you enjoyed this at all, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, as we are on our way to 300,000 subscribers, hopefully this year, over here on YouTube. I've got more Madden 26 and College Football 26 news and breakdowns coming for you guys very soon. So be safe, be smart, tell somebody you love them. Catch you guys on the next one.